Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, March 12th. This is the Konflux community call. The agenda is in its usual place. First up on the agenda, we've got Q1 presenting on an ADR on orchestrated component rebuilds. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this orchestrated rebuild story is mainly about nudging and bundle, or at least for this moment, I'm not sure if we're extending this feature to the other use cases, but the most important one at this moment is about building bundle images. So for example, if a bundle has multiple operator or operand images nudging this bundle image. So every time the bundle, the operator or operand image is built and pushed, it will trigger a build in bundle image, and it will be tested and released multiple times. But actually, sometimes they want to apply some change to operator and operand image, and they doesn't want to build the bundle image every time the operator or operand image is updated. Instead of that, they want to group the change. For example, when all the operator or operand images are updated, it just trigger one PR in bundle repository, and it will trigger one build and test, and then release just one bundle image, because in the current situations, the bundle will be released multiple times, even just in a single day, and that can cause unnecessary workload, resource waste, and also cause some confusions to our users. So the main purpose is to orchestrate or coordinate these nudging actions and only trigger one build, one release. So the proposal is introducing a new CR. So this part is a little tricky. So because I know we don't want to introduce new custom resources unless there is strong opinion about using that. So, but at this moment, we found that something like snapshot, group snapshot, or for example, using a same branch to group changes that has some limitations. Also, it's hard to indicate when the users want something to be grouped or not. So we need a CR to record or coordinate when to group changes. That's basically the idea. So I need some input or thoughts about this proposal. So if everyone had time, I appreciate your insights on this.
Thank you, Q1. I have two questions off the bat, but I encourage everybody else to ask questions too. Before my first question, though, a comment that just to remind everybody of the process. We have a defined process for managing ADRs, which I'll link in sidebar here. And what it means is that the first step is, of course, coming up with the idea and writing it with your peers, which Q1 has already done, and then opening a PR like this, announcing it on the community call here opens what we call the request for comments period, which should be about 2 weeks. So just as he was asking, please look at the PR, give comments. If all goes well, the KGC will try to make the Konflux governance committee will try to make a determination on it in 2 weeks' time. Sometimes we need more time than that. Often we do, but goal I think is in the first 2 weeks we can get it processed. But that can work especially well if the community can post comments and questions soon enough that the author can respond and get things resolved before the Konflux governance committee gets to their decision point. I mean, that would be optimal. My first question is about the nature of the new CR, a change group. And I had asked the question about like, why don't we want to add new CRs? I think there's maybe two reasons. And one is just that like it's cognitive load for our users. If we added new CRs all the time, then the API surface of our project just grows and grows and grows, and it becomes harder for people to understand what's going on. So we want to limit new CRs in order to prevent that sprawl. Maybe this feature warrants that, right? So that's just in general reason doesn't mean we don't do it here, but that's one thing to think about. The other thing is etcd load in the API server. We know we had problems in the past with sprawling, cascading CRs from lots and lots of pipeline runs and snapshots that would cause the cluster to fall over. And we've put in place lots of mechanisms to limit that now, but we're maybe scared from that point in time about adding new CRs. But that second use case only becomes a problem if the CR is what I would call a data plane CR. If it's something that's generated by the system by doing its work, then there will be lots of them. And then they'll take up lots of space in etcd, as opposed to if it's a control plane CR, like a component group, and it's created by a human or by a process once to kind of govern or guide a process. Then I think it imposes much less load on etcd, and that's less of a concern. And so this is my question, Q1. Can you characterize the change group CR? Which of those two is it? Is it a many, many times created CR, or is it something that's created usually once and just guides another controller's activities?
So basically in maybe the first or the second phases, we only let people or users to create the CR when they need to group the changes. So, but in the future, maybe in the third phase, we want to automate some progress about CVE remediation. For example, a CVE impact a base image, and all the operator and operand images are impacted by that. And the user wants to know when the fix for this CVE are ready for all the components, the operator or operand image, and then they can decide to go or not to go. So in this case, we want to automate the creation of this CR.
Okay, I think that makes sense. And I think that means it's the second class, where it's kind of muddy in between the two. It's a control thing because you're instructing the system to carry out a rebuild, but it's also in the event of cascading CVE rebuilds, you might see renovate or something like it, creating multiple of these resources for each tenant namespace.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That helps understand. I had a second question, but I forget what it was. So I'll put my hand down. If anybody else has questions, please raise your hand. Kuno, go ahead.
So I went over the ADR quickly, and if I understood correctly, this ADR proposes having a mutating webhook which cancels build pipeline runs for other components if it detects they are part of the change group. I'm not clear on that part, because I would expect that the individual components would still need to be built in order to be used.
Yes. So for example, operator is built and maybe not released yet, but the nudging is triggered and it runs as a separate pipeline run. So this pipeline run will open a PR to bundle repository, but we will have a mutating webhook that check if there is a group there. If yes, maybe we cancel this pipeline run. So that's why there is an important thing that about the migration of nudging from build service to integration service. So at this moment, build service create a dedicated pipeline run for this nudging, but after the migration, it's important to know, will this still a dedicated pipeline run, or it will be integrated into the existing integration pipeline runs. So we cannot just cancel a whole integration pipeline run. So it depends the implementation. So yes, Nicola?
Yeah, just a side note that build service doesn't start currently any pipelines. It only configures pipeline as code and all the settings. So we don't trigger, we don't start any pipelines from within build service. So that's the first point. Second is that according to the new application component model, we are moving logic for nudges from a build service side to integration. And here we need an extra coordination with this feature if we plan to implement it, so you don't do the work twice.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think this will definitely need to affect this ADR. But yeah, the base thing is the base thing that I don't really understand from the proposed logic is that canceling build pipeline runs. That part is kind of unclear to me because I think we only considered a build for a component truly complete if the entire build pipeline run finishes, because it also runs. It doesn't only build the component; it runs extra checks at this point, and all of these are required for the component to actually be allowed or gated for a subsequent release and promotion to production. So I would expect that this requirement will still be for the build pipeline to fully complete. So we know that the component is actually built, the image is actually available, and everything around it. So that part is unclear to me.
Yes, so to clarify, we are not canceling the build pipeline, but I'm unclear. So I thought that build service is creating a dedicated pipeline run just for nudging, not building images. So maybe I was wrong. I will check that later. So if they are creating a dedicated pipeline run just for nudging, then we can cancel that. If that's part of the build pipeline run, we cannot cancel that.
I can answer your question. So nudging pipelines are created via pipeline as code mechanisms. So basically, build service creates currently on nudge, it just creates a pull request, which in turn triggers a new build pipeline. So in fact, from the system point of view, currently it doesn't matter, is it pull request created by the system itself for a nudge, or is it pull request from a user? So system doesn't distinguish those. Like we have labels by which we can do this in the build pipeline, but like the system itself uses the same mechanism.
And I guess forgetting the mechanism, the thing you're trying to achieve is that the orchestrated rebuild process is just trying to suppress nudges in certain circumstances.
Yes, when there is a group exist.
Apologies, I haven't read the ADR yet, but I mean, maybe it makes sense to look at either changing the control logic of build service itself that's doing the nudges, or to extract that nudging logic into its own service, where this kind of higher level logic that you want to achieve can be embodied in one place. We'll go and look at the ADR. I think at this point, I don't want to try to make decisions on the call about it in a fast way.
Isn't the extraction actually the thing that we will do when we move? When we move to the new model? It's maybe a question to Chrono, I believe.
Yeah. So the current plan is to move the nudging logic to the integration service, and this might give us the opportunity to actually be able to make these kinds of decisions as part of the integration service. So we don't have to intercept nudges, and we can just make a decision on should we create make a nudge or not. So yeah, I think that this definitely warrants further discussion. Maybe a tiny bit of an issue is that we are still in the process of creating our own ADR on moving the nudging logic into the integration service. So things might be at some points too fuzzy to make a decision. So yeah, just a heads up. We'll definitely keep an eye on this, and we'll try to include everybody in the discussions on the actual migration to the integration service. But yeah, I'd say we could have an opportunity to include the proposed end goal of this ADR as part of the integration services nudging logic.
Kuno, if you guys aren't ready to have that ADR up for review on how nudging can work as a part of integration services domain, could you publish a stub ADR pull request in draft mode that would let us link them so that when we're reviewing the orchestrated rebuild ADR, we can at least see the link to the placeholder for that idea and then try to think about it, even though we don't have full details yet.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
Even just the name, and then to do, okay, is okay, Okay.
Yep.
Juan, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Let's follow up async in the pull request. Everybody, please get your comments on it, read the ADR, and we'll go from there. Next on the agenda, if I'm looking at it, I have Adam Kaplan, but he appears to not be on the call still, so I'm going to move him down. And Tomasz Kopacek, Tomasz Molchak, you're up next on cosign and SBOM management.
Hi there. Tomasz, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I can start. Basically, what is it about? The cosign project was deprecating download and attach SBOM commands for a long time, I think from 2022 or something like that. And now they are finally going to do that in the next release. And I have digged through the build definitions repo, and it's used maybe in 15 places, this approach. And also, or where we hit it, is the RPM build pipeline, where we are also using it for the uploading the SBOMs. And we theoretically can replace it with the cosign attest and doing it a good way. But what I was afraid is that it's in these 15 places. Shouldn't there be some more general approach how to deal with these attestation issues? Should it be done by each team maintaining their own task, or should there be some overview from, for example, this audience? Or I don't know. I would like to have it more consistent over all the task definitions and pipelines. So opening for discussion here.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, we have opened a discussion with cosign already about the cosign attest it was, but it is pretty related, I would say, because, we've mentioned that cosign attest could be used instead of cosign attach, but that doesn't seem the case actually, because the SIG-Store team doesn't want SBOMs attested, as that would create a huge load on Recor. If you remember, yeah, Ralph Beam is nodding, so I think he remembers.
But explain it for everybody else, because not everybody else knows that story.
Yeah, we had a problem that we rolled attesting SBOMs into production and caused some issues in Recor. And it was because the whole SBOM is uploaded to Recor and it crashes if the SBOM is too huge. So we reached out to SIG-Store, and their reaction was, well, don't attest SBOMs, just upload them as blob into registry and sign manifests of those SBOMs. And that is only available in the reference API 1.1. So we actually have to update our cosign versions to actually use this. But this is the only way that SIG-Store wants us to store SBOMs in registries, I would say. I also have a link to conversation in Slack. I will send it to this chat. That's on the SIG-Store Slack channel. And we had a discussion there.
I would add that looking a little bit ahead is maybe not the position of the community, but I feel like in that Slack thread, I got the impression that the cosign maintainers don't want to be involved in dealing with the OCI API at all. And so even if there's support now for just attaching the artifact and then you sign the manifest like you described, Merrick, that they may want to even get away from that functionality in the future. This is not clear, just like an opinion that is in the thread. So if that were to be the case, then I think our strategy should be to use ORAS to attach the SBOM, attach whatever artifact, and then use the same signing mechanism where appropriate. Currently, our build pipeline task doesn't sign the SBOM at all when it produces it. Just attaching it using ORAS attach would be equivalent, I think, to SBOM cosign attach SBOM. And so we should just switch to that. In terms of like how we carry it out, Tomasz, I think I was hearing from you an idea that maybe there should be some common library or common technology piece that makes this common across our tasks. That I think is a possibility, but whether we do that or just change all those implementations in place, we should write an ADR that says we used to do it this way, now we're doing it this way, this is why. Let's get that. It should be a simple ADR, changes the rules of how we implement tasks, and that may or may not include a common implementation library. I think my opinion is that I'd rather just switch to using Oros directly, because it is the library that we would be switching to rather than having our own abstraction there on top of it. But if I could be convinced, I think.
My idea was not about the technical part, not the generic library, but if there is someone who is looking over the things that we are doing this really consistently, if we will decide to use the Oros instead, who will check through all the build definitions that we are using Oros now? Because there is probably not such team or person.
Clearly, because we're in the situation we're in now, this has been deprecated for maybe 2 years. So, I mean, we've been dodging it. The American football metaphor is punting, which is just delaying, time. So, Tomasz, can I ask, can you write that ADR? If not, I'll do it as soon as I can. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't need to mention every task. It's just a new rule for the road. Yeah. And then we need to make all task maintainers aware of it, and they're responsible for moving their tasks. If they don't move, then they're going to break when the new version of cosign comes out, and when we rebase our common task runner image to that new version of cosign. So they can wait until they break and then deal with it then, or they can deal with it as soon as they can. Bruno.
Just a quick note, Konflux test tasks or also use cosign to download SBOMs. So we definitely want to be aware of this, since the Konflux test tasks that have their own separate task runner image, which also updates their cosign version.
Mm-hmm. There may be a transition period problem where the way it gets uploaded with cosign and the way it gets attached with Oros is slightly different. And so if there's tasks that are expecting to consume these things, they may need to have both code paths for a time. I think most tasks only upload. The test task I didn't think about downloading, but I suppose it does. Release tasks as well. That's the bigger coordination problem, really, now that I think about the problem a little bit more in full, is that the release pipelines are primary consumers of this information for various reasons, conform as well. So the ADR just got more complicated. Tomasz, if you still want to do it, go for it. Otherwise, ping me in Slack and we can work out the details. Any other comments, questions on this? Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll move discussion to the ADR when it shows up. Thank you, Tomasz, for raising it. Again, looking at the rolling agenda, I think we'll move on now to Adam or Mandy on GitOps and UI-based configurator.
Maybe let's go to Taylor first, just because she has they have an announcement.
Taylor, are you okay with that?
Yep, totally fine.
Go for it.
Morning, everybody. So I'll just do a little background first. So Hermeto is the tool that's used in Konflux build pipelines to prefetch content. It's one aspect of the system that enables users to build hermetically. So typically, Hermeto is prefetching from the content directly from public package registries for different ecosystems. So think like npmjs.org or PyPy. But a fairly common use case for lots of different organizations is that to have an internal registry proxy or mirror that sort of sits as a middleman between the upstream registry and the user's build. And there's several different reasons for that. You can essentially locally cache upstream content. You can have the opportunity to deploy some policy rules around what gets ingested or what can be used. And a big one lately is the ability to block like known malicious packages and the like. So this ADR is about enabling Hermeto to use a registry proxy like that in Konflux build pipelines.
Cool.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question, which is we somewhat recently, a few months ago, merged another ADR that was also about a proxy configuration for tasks. It's a different proxy, right?
Yes, I think you're talking about ADR 57, which is the pipeline caching one.
Yeah. So right away, this feels like it'll be confusion. So we need to somehow make clear that the proxy discussed in those two topics are different proxies in the ADR text.
Yes, and it might even be slightly even more confusing just because this ADR uses some of the same things that were added in that one, namely like the same sort of user flag to enable it in their build pipeline, and then an administrator flag that sort of is the kill switch for the cluster, whether they're going to enable the feature to be able to be used. And all of this is in that global like cluster info config map that got created in that ADR. So
okay, I suppose it's good that it uses the same mechanisms and the same patterns. The names of all the variables will need to be especially clear, and then the text in the ADR will need to be especially clear. So when somebody scratches their head, they can come and understand as quick as possible. Links between the ADRs bidirectionally to say, if you're reading this, think twice. You are curious about this or that?
yes, yep. No, that's a very good point.
Awesome. Any questions on this for Taylor? Process-wise, I said it before, I'll say it again. So this is announced on the call, opening request for comments period. The KGC will try to make a decision about this on March 26th. Get your comments and questions in the ADR, and Taylor be looking for those comments and questions if you can resolve them. Before we get to that point, then KGC can make the decision. Now I'm off topic, but like I feel like in the KGC we've run into situations where we get to the day we want to make a decision and we feel a certain way about it, but there's still 20 open comment threads from various people, some with responses, some not. And when those aren't resolved, we know our opinion, but we're not sure if we feel good like overriding all those. So if the author can resolve those, that gets us into the best, most expedient path. Cool. Thank you, Taylor. Adam, are you ready now?
Yeah. So I just wanted to start the discussion. I don't think we will like finish today. As you may or may not be aware, we will be working on push to make Konflux more or less GitOps only mode. The configuration of resources from the UI, like the resources like components, groups, and this kind of resources won't be possible. And there will even idea to completely disable this capability, at least on production cluster, to create this kind of resources directly, even through CLI, that you would have to use GitOps. That's well and good. The problem is that creates a sort of user experience problem, especially if you are a new user or you are just wanted to try something out. And the problem is that compared to GitLab CI, where the GitOps works because it's like super simple, you can literally in like 15 minutes have a very basic working pipeline. There's not really a case for Konflux, as you have many if you want to create any pipeline, you have to create several objects which needs to be in some sort of relationship, and that can be quite a big ask, especially if you are just like playing around. And my question, or more like a proposal, is that we should still be like GitOps first, or make sure that Konflux GitOps first, and that in general you are not configuring stuff through UI, but maybe we can create some sort of configurator, like UI-based configurator, that instead of creating stuff on cluster, would prepare a PR in your repository of choice. Like one of the ideas was that there would be two modes. One mode, if this is just like a sandbox cluster where you are trying stuff out, it would create resources directly on the cluster. But if you are on production cluster, this would be more of a like helper, and it would create a GitOps PR, in your GitOps repository. But you would have this UI element, which could be useful, especially for users that do not want to like really understand how stuff is done and don't want to do, YAML management, for them, it could be very useful to have this abstraction and be able to use, UI-based configuration, because as far as I understand right now, we are basically forcing users to use GitOps, at least in production. So I'm not saying that if we have this configurator that we would it would be for everybody. Here, the aim is more like for the new users that don't want to use Konflux too often, so they just want to very quickly set something up. Basically, the 80% of the user base that's probably are not these power users and just need very simple stuff. Obviously, if you are power user or are having large portfolios, this probably won't be as useful. But for you, I believe we need completely different tooling because your use case for Konflux is completely different. So I hope that my little monologue made sense. So any opinions or anything you would like to share or discuss?
I want to say something. Brock raises his hand too. Good. So by analogy, I have a problem as an administrator of our GitHub organization, Konflux CI. It has a nice UI that we can, every time someone says we need a new repository for foo, I can click and add it and add a couple people as administrators. Maybe we create a team, maybe we don't. Add that team as an owner of the repo. And over time, as it grows, I now have so many repos. We have so many repos that managing access to them all at scale, I want to be able to review access across the board, and it's a huge manual process for me to do that. So what was easy at first put me in a position now where I need to engineer my way out of that solution. I feel like we need a GitOps management of the ACLs and repo definitions for all of Konflux CI org. It would be nice for me. People could send pull requests proposing that we add new repos rather than asking people on Slack to do it. So that aside, I'm just trying to illustrate the divide between those two experiences. I think it's a real problem for us. That it's exactly as you say it is, that for power users, whether they're 20% of our user base or 80% of our user base, need a GitOps mode of operating to operate kind of responsibly and at scale. But for that to be the first time you use the system, if you had to leave the UI and go to a GitOps flow, it would be overwhelming, right? Before you do anything. So the problem I think that got us to the original ADR that decided, okay, we're going to make the UI read only and do GitOps only, was that the production instances that downstream consumers of Konflux run are in this mixed situation where some tenants are not GitOps based and others are, and that just creates operational problems that we said we just got to simplify this and make it one way. If we were to make it two ways, the solution probably has to include something about it that allows a tenant administrator or an individual tenant to resolve that problem. If they started by clicking, how can they easily put themselves now in the GitOps mode? Is it a button they click in the UI that says, all the resources that I've created here by hand, please make them a part of the initial PR to the GitOps repo? That might do it, Switch mode.
Yeah, it's a good question. Basically, the idea of this configurator is that compared to right now, where you actually as you are going in the UI, you are creating objects. Here, it would be more sort of staging up what you want to achieve. And then at the end, you would just have this, okay, you created this new setup, new configuration. So I want to either apply it on the cluster, which would be possible on some sandbox, or especially in production, go and create PR in your GitOps repository. So I see it more I understand why we do GitOps, and I believe we should make sure that we get this ability for disaster recovery and such. This is more like a helper over the GitOps, because right now the UI is set up that you directly creating objects as you are creating them. This is more okay, I'm setting stuff around, and we can show visualizations how stuff is connected, and we can hold your hands with forms and yada yada yada. And then at the end, you would be like, okay, I'm satisfied with whatever I configured, like this idea of a configuration. So now I want to create a PR or update the PR, or in some instances, especially for the sandbox cluster, like, okay, apply this configuration on the cluster. And until you click this button, like the new configuration lives just in the configurator. And this would work nicely, especially like now, I believe Barak, but Vanguard, we will be working on this GitOps feature. So this big GitOps repository should go away completely. Okay, Barak, please go ahead.
Yeah, so at the risk of reiterating or restarting discussions that we already had back on the original GitOps ADR, I really wonder if the Konflux UI is the best place for users to start. And for me, there are a couple of alternative ideas to that. So one of them is the user is already in his AI-powered IDE when he starts. So /onboard me to Konflux, I think it's the simplest thing for them. If we can make that happen somehow. So that's one idea. The other idea is maybe they're looking at Backstage or our own instance of Backstage. I mean, Backstage declared purpose is to be the starting point for things. So, if we can make sure that the golden repos in Backstage are pre-onboarded to Konflux somehow, then again, no need for a dedicated UI, it just kind of happens. So I would really run to look at those directions before we try to plan a dedicated UI for this. But I think this was kind of discussed a bit on the original ADR, so maybe we crossed those ways of thinking already for some reasons. I'm not sure. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so even if you go with Backstage idea, you still need something in Backstage if you want to do this. And this technically was discussed in the ADR, where the Brian's idea was to create VS Code plugin for this, which is also a possibility. That said, if it is VS Code plugin, then we are losing this, I install Konflux in Sandbox. I just want to play with it. I don't want to configure anything, this demonstrability. Maybe that's something we can live with. Okay, you need to install VS Code plugin and do this and that and this and that. It's just it creates it's a choice that is not for free. When you have that, okay, I spin up a Konflux, which is not easy task in itself, and now I need to do this, and this to even start doing anything. That can be quite a big barrier of entry, because people are lazy, and if it is super hard to get to something which is working, they can stop trying very quickly. And obviously, there you have set of users that maybe don't want to use IDE. Then you have problems with AI specifically, that it can lead to all kinds of problems because AI. So the question is and obviously even in this UI-based configurator, we can use AI in some capacity to help to create the actual configuration.
Yeah.
Maybe it's maybe also a question where we want to meet the user.
So I'm tempted to say that if I go into Cursor right now, open a repo and tell it to onboard it to Konflux, I suspect it will get very close to what needs to happen. I mean, it's already doing stuff. I just asked him whether my pipeline was hermetic and to do stuff to make it hermetic, and I didn't even reference the documentation, and it's figured it out. And that's where more complex than onboarding. So I'm kind of want to try to apply Pareto here and say, hey, what is already easy, and can we make that a little bit easier? Again, before going, because planning a new UI, that's a big task, right? Even if we do use agents to write it for us.
Yeah.
So it's kind of tempting for me at least to think in this way, where maybe it's already solved and we just didn't really notice.
The thing about the configurator UI too is that it's not just a UI; it has to hold state, right? Because you're like telling it, I want this and I want that, and so it's building up its own mind of what you have before it either applies it to the cluster or applies it to your GitOps repo, and that makes it it's gonna have to have at least 2 layers, right? A front end and a back end, or do it all in like browser storage. Consider like a CLI that could do the same thing, that could be used by a Backstage backend, that could be used by like a Claude skill and shared between those, that handles some of the mechanics of like setting up a bunch of components so Claude doesn't hallucinate and make a mistake about the API, but could still get close to the experience you're looking for, Barak, while also powering something else.
Well, hallucinating is, I believe, the part that always will be there.
Yeah, but it's different that you encapsulate the details that it would hallucinate, like fields in the API, and just tell it, just run the script, and it creates a component, and so you like fix those details from the LLM. And a human could use it the same, right? You're just, I want to onboard my stuff, and so my little bash script calls the CLI 5 times to do what I know is right. Something I'd love to see, Adam, it's like a small change, is in the UI, any resource that's managed by Argo today has a little annotation on it, a couple annotations on it. And I would love to see a tiny little watermark indicator on every resource in the UI that tells me whether that resource is managed by Argo or not managed by Argo.
Well, the issue there is that as it is right now, when the GitOps change will go out, you won't be able to manage these resources in any other way. So that's why I believe I closed feature for this.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay. In this new world you're proposing, though, that wouldn't be the case, right? A user would be able to apply stuff directly to the cluster outside of GitOps.
Like, I believe we need to keep this option open for like a sandbox, and I want to try stuff out. Like, probably if you want to like show it quickly to people, having like, okay, now we need to spend 2 hours setting the Konflux up and Konflux the repositories up. Like maybe like one by one, it's a simple task, but we are not beating experience that people in GitLab CI can have.
Yeah, sandbox. I see.
And obviously, like if we're talking about maybe like some institutional users of Konflux, this is slightly different. But if you want to also attract hobbyists, this ease of use is a consideration.
Yeah.
But that said, like it doesn't have to be like the configurator can be like just GitOps only. This was mainly just to have this ability to, okay, like you want to try it out, so here is a configurator, go, and you don't have to set up anything else, really.
I don't remember from the old UI if did we discuss the idea of writing things to the cluster just like we do today, UI writes to the cluster, but then there's some mechanism to extract what you've got from the cluster and put it into a GitOps mode, to like export to switch your mode to GitOps. Because then you wouldn't need a special configurator. You could just continue to use the current UI as you do to explore. And then when you finally got something that you're happy with, you don't have to recreate it, in some other method. It just
I don't know if we talked about it in the ADR itself, but the problem there is if, for example, is that you use UI, like the current UI, and then you need to apply the changes, there is a problem that the developer is like going around the UI and configuring stuff, and now somehow needs to explain to him that whatever you created is not applied yet. And here there could be a problem of like, okay, this applied, so how I will forward users to go and actually commit this to the GitOps?
Oh no, I think what I'm proposing is that the system should do that for them. That they do things in the UI, they actually get applied to cluster. But like in that little watermark icon, it would say not managed by GitOps everywhere. And when they are happy with what they've got, there's some sort of button they can click in the UI at a top level that says, hey, export everything I have that's not managed by GitOps to the GitOps repo that I'm associated with based on the mechanisms of the last ADR, and the system should send the pull request for them, saying saving the current state of your repository. It would break if they already had stuff with like a special customized configuration, because like all we could do is give them the raw resources.
Like theoretically could be, but I think that can lead to all kinds of race conditions, especially if on the GitOps repo itself somebody's also proposing changes. Just like not saying these are unsolvable problems, it's just like the user experience maybe is not like the greatest.
Yep.
But maybe it is actually maybe interesting proposition that you are able to export your configuration.
Yeah. This is back to my story about the github.com UI. This is what I want with our organization settings, is that it's not like clicking through and doing things manually was wrong in the beginning, and it's all like really good, valuable information. Like the build service maintainers should have access to the build service repo. I want to be able to extract all that information just as it is and then just put it in a new management form. Because like well, I guess maybe one of the problems with the configurator is that they're building out like state, but they're not able to do like an inner loop thing where they're learning what they did, how it works. If it doesn't actually go live to the cluster, like they never actually get the build pipeline. It says, oh, now I see. They're just getting like the skeleton built out. And we can be telling them how it's going to work, I guess, but it's the experience of really seeing your build, seeing the pull request go to your repo, seeing the build status come back on GitHub when you've onboarded that component. That's all like part of the user learning how the whole thing works.
Well, now thinking about with the GitOps only, that we are losing this also.
Yeah, we are. I kind of, in that discussion, at least myself mentally, I kind of committed to the idea that we were going to drop a newbie-friendly onboarding experience in favor of a power user onboarding experience. And part of that was driven by our experience as most of us being Red Hat engineers operating the Red Hat instances, that all of the teams using that instance are now need to be in that power user mode. And we had almost nobody who was benefiting from the click-through.
Well, that's the problem, that they would be benefiting. And when I did these user sessions, they often complained actually that we force them to be these power users.
Interesting. I assume wrong.
And they actually have like a lot of problems with, I don't understand Konflux, like these YAML files. I don't want to understand them. You are asking me to fix them when there is some sort of problems. And I can imagine that we are in this like highly diverging situation. And especially if they also use AI to fix their stuff, we have this like cognitive tech debt, I would call that.
Yeah.
Like they're fixing stuff they don't understand. Now it's Band-Aid on Band-Aid, but I'm sorry, that's a different conversation for different time.
Yeah. Adam, I'm looking at time, 10 minutes left. I think there's one more topic to cover, which we won't have time to get into deep, but how would you like to wrap up this conversation for today?
Maybe like just that we are thinking about it. Maybe we'll create some sort of mock-ups, just like how it could look like. Maybe that can help to make to lead the conversation. That said, like also maybe like going more through agents is also a possibility. It's more about, I believe, we need to go back to being newbie friendly. Like this power user idea, I don't think it will work out for us. Like it's not working out for us, but the problem is that we are power users, so maybe we don't notice that as much.
I think that's a fair accusation. You know what I mean? Like that we're blind to newbie problems based on just where we are on our own curve. And yeah, okay. Thank you for
can we have some sort of an ADR like process for this? I mean, I'm not really, like the current ADR format is not really friendly towards UI oriented discussions, I think, unless you want to try to draw with ASCII the screens. But something along those same lines, I think, will benefit here. Again, it works well for other kind of big ideas. So when
you mean like ADR, that there is several approaches how to do this? If to go for it even if it go for it, and how it could look like if it is like UI configurator, VS Code plugin that is used for like AI, something like have this discussion in ADR. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just not sure ADR, specifically is the best place, but something along the same process ADR, open it up for discussion, now that everybody comment and make some sort of a decision within a limited time frame. Again, it works very well for architectural decisions, and this is a kind of an architectural decision.
Yeah, I will figure something out after my vacation.
And I think maybe Adam doesn't know what he wants to do yet, so like proposing the ADR, maybe he's not there yet, but if he and peers think about it some more, Barak, go talk with Adam, on Slack and brainstorm stuff together, and maybe you two can co-author the ADR for all of us to come and complain about.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, guys. I want to use the last few minutes to talk about the last point on the agenda, which is this fullsend repo. I was asked by my boss to begin thinking about what a full agent workflow would look like for software development of Konflux itself. So right off the bat, the idea here is not to replace components of Konflux and what it does with agents or LLMs. The determinism of the build process that we bring and the benefits that has for supply chain security are not something we want to influence with non-deterministic LLM agent stuff. But it's about what we're talking about right now, right? The process of feature refinement, of architecture decisions for Konflux, for how code gets implemented and how code gets reviewed. We've all started to use LLMs for code generation. The volume of code and is increasing, and the quality of that code is maybe decreasing, which is overwhelming our reviewers. How do we get to a point? I see you, Eric. I'll get to you in just a moment. How do we get to a point where we can apply our judgment as humans in the system in a way that is expanding our ability, our velocity and our ability to move feature changes and bug fixes through the system, rather than continuing to be overwhelmed, which is how I feel in some cases. There's tons about this. Some other things to say about this is that there's a lot of news headlines out there about people who claim to be doing this at an individual level. Some blog posts about companies who claim to be doing this at like a company scale or organization scale. I'm not aware of good public examples of how this works, in particular with an open source project at scale. That's not like a small single person open source project. It is a kind of endeavor that if we undertook it without thinking about all the risks and problems, that we would get ourselves into hot water right away. And so where I'm at in this process, I mean, it's maybe 4 or 5 working days ago, started this repo. And the goal, I think right now, is to think through all of the problems. Anything that could happen as a result of adopting a workflow like this that would result in code being merged that would be disastrous in some way, or even slightly problematic, or creeping problems over time. All of those I want to document in this repo in an expansive or divergent thinking kind of way, meaning don't think just of the problem in one light, but think of the problem and try to think about multiple aspects of it and document those. Once we feel like we've exhausted our imagination on that front, then start thinking through for each of those problems, what are potential solutions so that we don't like get fixed and in love with one particular solution. What technologies out there already exist that we might borrow to implement some of those solutions? What of those have inadequate solutions out there that we would need to build our own to do? And then finally, I want to proceed down an experimental path, which is for each of these, try to set up experiments of them that have low consequences of failure, but high value in terms of like the knowledge that we would get about what that solution would bring to trying to solve that particular problem. There's a lot of problems. So that means that this was going to take a while to do, but I'm working on it, and I would love to invite everybody who is interested in it or concerned about it to come and help participate and build out the problems, build out potential solutions, and join me in that experimental mindset. Eric, I see your hand.
Thank you. Rob, that was a wonderful intro. Thank you. So I only briefly looked at the repo, so please correct me when I'm wrong. I'm quite new to like the full all agentic automated workflows. But if I understand correctly, this revolves around I think we can call it a new paradigm, right? Void to spec, correct? So yeah. So regardless of the final idea that we'd be just mere operators or overseers of whatever is happening underneath. So pretty much like DevOps on steroids, except that you don't really have an idea what's happening because everything is just or should happen according to the spec. And that gives me shivers even to think about that. But back to void to spec. So what are the thoughts? How are we thinking about, okay, the AI is only going to do this according to a spec. Cool. And having been trained on many data sets, it can probably avoid some obvious security issues and overlooks that a human would do. However, it's only working according to the spec, which again was written by a human. So just like we have bugs in the code, I can expect we can have bugs in the spec. And there's a serious issue because, do we even understand how, the complexity of how a spec can translate to the individual actions, to the code that's been generated, to the way how things have been delivered, deployed, released. So I'm interested in how we are even thinking about that, because like I said, I'm really new to not using AI, but new to the paradigm of void to spec. So how are we thinking about this? How do we envision we could prevent some catastrophic scenarios with going full on AI, fully agentic workflow with Konflux as a CI/CD pipeline?
I'll add my thoughts. And also just looking at time, we're 1 minute till the top of the hour. I would like to keep going and extend this discussion for a bit. I'm free for the next half hour, but we'll record it. If people want to review it later, please stay if you want to stay. Thanks for that. Sorry to run over if it's disrespectful of people's time if people could only stay till now, but it's a discussion I want to have. Eric, maybe there's two ways to think about it. One is from the spec forwards, and the other is from code merge backwards. So like at code merge backwards, one of them, maybe this isn't a direct answer to your question, but I think a lot about that point. How would an agent that's a change is coming in, it looks like it's from an agent that's from our vibe to spec workflow, but maybe it's not, maybe it's a malicious input. How can we build a review system that confirms that it's bug-free without obvious security vulnerabilities, and matches what is intended for the system by us, by the set of humans that are trying to guide the system to do the thing that we want it to do? And one thing to know, if you're new to LLM technology, that people have learned is that when you give a single agent instance lots of instructions, that they tend to fail. And it's almost the same as a human in a way, where if you give a single individual person too many responsibilities and ask them to do all those responsibilities at the same time, they invariably miss or drop one and apply only whatever judgment they can in the moment. And so the strategy, I think, must end up looking like multiple individual review agents with individual responsibilities. One just looking for kind of general security vulnerabilities. One looking for general bugs or mismatches or shortcomings in the code. One looking for matching the code that's coming in to the intent that's expressed in the feature. Another that's looking for mismatches between the code that's coming in and architectural constraints that we've defined elsewhere. We have a lot of architectural constraints in our ADR repo, and there are actually many more that aren't even written down. We need to get those written down, but even such an agent, we may need multiple instances of it so that it doesn't become confused, looking at all of the ADRs that it has to apply and consider, is this change consistent with? So that's one side of it. On the spec creation side, how did you frame it? It was that, how do we be sure, I don't think you said it this way, but how can we be sure that the spec isn't ambiguous in a way that is problematic or disastrous? And I think it looks like building an agent that tries to judge this just that. When we're inputting specs at the front of the system somehow, we don't know how we do that. Maybe it's merge requests, sort of pull requests to a repo that's defining our feature intent. When things get merged into certain states, we mean, all right, system, go build that whatever we've merged this section. Maybe part of the automated review on that, if we're putting things in, is an agent that's just being given the task of looking for ambiguity in interpretation and asks clarifying questions. I block this PR. Humans are not allowed to merge it until it's clear whether you mean this or this or this or this. And if you've never tried, you should try it sometime using Cloud Code or any of the AI agents to do just that. I've found personally in my workflow in the last year or so, you can use it to vibe code something, but it tends to be I find it useful also for thinking that I've got a problem in front of me and I need help figuring out the multiple aspects of the problem that I should be considering. And it tends to actually be quite good at that, especially if you ask it explicitly to try to be divergent in its thinking.
Can I react, or do you have
Please.
something more to share?
No,
okay, so no. I mean, like from that perspective, like I do use Claude regularly, so this is not a problem. Confining or asking the agent to ask clarifying questions. That's not what I meant, because like I'm still the human operating a single instance where I'm in charge of either evaluating the code they generated or evaluating the review that it provided to the generated code. So I'm in the end of the pipeline always. So I have very good understanding of what's happening, right? So it's just that I automated the way that we got that. What I wanted to, the message I tried to convey in my original point was, when you abstract all of this to individual agents where you don't really have this, and you distribute the problem among several instances, like you have a reviewer, architecture designer, then you have all of this, and they work in an automated fashion. So like the human aspect is that we work with programming languages. These are very deterministic. So when there's a failure, you just look at the code and start debugging, right? Because like the logic, however complex it is, it can only have a single meaning, right? So you can get to the root of the problem, because there should only ever be a single interpretation of the algorithm. However, with this, you have a spec, and you said it in your response, Ralph. It is a matter of interpretation. How do we debug interpretation, right? So it doesn't need to be a spec for, a single spec for all agents. All agents have their own instructions, and you said, okay, so let's keep it short because more instructions can lead to failure. Okay, I get that part. That's reasonable. But if you just unload all of these agents to work in some kind of coordination, and every single one of them has its own interpretation of some spec. How do you debug an issue? It doesn't need to be a malicious agent. It might be a problem that, a particular set of instructions was not clear. When I, do that on my own in my own local Claude session, and I try something and I just don't like the output, I say, okay, I'm at the end of the pipeline. I don't like the output. Probably let's have a look at the instructions, that I gave the agent, and I can, keep iterating until I, find the sweet spot in the instructions so that I can trust it more. But if this is all automated, where do you exactly, as a human operator, where do you look? Where do you start your debugging? Where do you suspect the issue will be? At which point, right? So where the interpretation failed, is it a problem that our spec is not confined correctly, so we just give too much leeway to the agents, or the instructions were unclear, or let alone malicious? That is a whole another problem. We don't really need to talk about security. So this is what I'm talking about. Where do you even start finding out the problems if everything is written in human language and it's based on interpretation? If we just talk over chat, you don't really have that's non-verbal communication, so you cannot really unless you see the person, you can have hard time understanding sometimes what they mean, and you need to read in between the lines. And now you put this into the AI, so that's the interpretation part of it. That's problematic for me. I'm sorry for a long explanation. So do you have a reaction on that?
No, and what's interesting is, so because we're in this kind of like, it's like a question answer, like almost challenge mode. Like I feel compelled to try to offer solutions, but I'm gonna try and fight back from that and say that this, can we name this problem? Is this debuggability in the system? And maybe it's two problems, but at least one of them, a major one, is debuggability at multiple points in the system.
Correct. Yes.
In the fullsend repo, can you submit a markdown document called debuggability that describes these problems? Because this is some of I feel like, you know, this human reaction to try to offer solutions right now, but rather I would like to try to expand on that problem, and then we need to figure out multiple solutions to it so we don't jump to whatever the first thing that comes to mind is.
Sure. So do you accept this as a potential like issues, a list of issues that we need to resolve, or like even solutions? Because I might be very solving solutions.
Yeah, it's a problem for sure. How do we, and especially progressively, right? There'll be relationships to some of the other problems. Like one of the problems is about governance and progression. So like right now we have 0 working software for this. So obviously we can't turn it on for the whole org. And when we do have something that we at least feel confident we might try, maybe we want to turn it on for only one repo that is like our lowest risk repo after we've observed it, you know, doing something that we're happy enough to do. How we agree to roll this out is its own problem, and debuggability is related to that. How can we possibly gain confidence to turn things on if we haven't been able to observe the interactions and judge them over some period of time? So yes, I accept that it's a problem. Also, it's related to the other problems. That's all I'm trying to say. I think I start thinking about solutions. I've been thinking about, Adam Kaplan had proposed a problem document that hasn't been merged yet, but it's about contributor interaction. So like, do we intend to build a system that is hybrid in some way, where there's an agent flow that is doing spec through, you know, vibe to spec through to implementation, and at the same time human contributors are writing patches and reviewing patches and playing a role in the same system? And a part of what I think he was expressing in there is that review agents in particular, for example, should always provide information about why they're rejecting something, along with instructions that would be useful to a human about how to comply with whatever they need to comply with as the system evolves and adds new kind of like requirements on top. Like if every change needs to be able to correspond with some sort of merged intent spec, then when a human submits a code change, they're going to be blocked because their change maybe doesn't, you know, reflect, which feels like bureaucracy, right? So we need to make, if we add bureaucratic aspects to the system in order to make sure the agents aren't doing the wrong thing, we need to do that in such a way that Adam's proposing in his document that also enables humans to navigate that bureaucracy as frictionlessly as possible, so we don't, like, you know, make it a hell to work in. So anyway, I'm sorry, that's similarly related to your debuggability problem in that it would expose the rationale, and the rationale needs to be exposed at multiple points, and perhaps ideally in the place where humans would interact with the system anyways, in pull requests. Anybody else have questions about this? I don't want to drag on people and leave them on the call forever if we don't need to. Eric, do you have any other comments or questions?
I don't think I have at this point. So like you said, this is a very new initiative. So this was the very first thing that came to my mind when I saw the announcement in the repo. So
yeah, right on. Thank you for raising it. Just restating myself now. Current mode I want to be in is expanding on the problems, which is exactly what we're doing. So take a look at the other problem docs. Hopefully you find them.
I'll try to put something down and open a pull request, I guess, or do you use discussions? Or?
Yeah, pull request, please.
Okay.
Okay, let's end the call. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Good discussions all around. I'm going to end the recording.
Thank you.